Tananarive, I want to thank you for coming on tonight.
Oh,
Steve
my pleasure.
dropped by the station last week and told us what a good writer you were. You were going to be in town, and you got me the book a couple days ago, and your new book, My Soul to Keep, is fabulous.
Oh, thank you.
It is an absolutely outstanding book. It's the kind of book you want to just settle into and savor the words and the imagery and the flow of the story. You are one good writer.
Well, I'm speechless. Thank you very much.
No, don't be. This is radio.
No, really,
I take it back.
I have nothing more to say.
We're out of here.
It is, the book really grabs hold of you. I mean, the opening, your little prologue, which sets up things, which runs 3 pages, which I was reading it, and I'm reading it, and just kind of like being pulled along by the flow of the words. And then when you get to the ending of that prologue, it's like you run into a brick wall. The way you pull the rug out from under the reader.
That's exactly what I was hoping for.
She's mean.
A little bit.
Neat,
She looks sweet,
neat opening. One obvious question: the prologue. You pull the reader along, and then just literally the last sentence of the page, at the bottom of the page, is like bang, you hit the snapper. Did you get any calls from the publisher saying we need 1 sentence more or 2 sentences less to make it work out that way?
It was just absolute luck that it turned out that way, because I guess the dramatic effect would not have worked if you had to flip the page over
yeah.
for 1 line in the top of the next page. It was just lucky that it ended that way.
Yeah, that was amazing the way that worked out. I would have sworn you had worked with the publisher for weeks.
Nope.
Just to get it to work out, so you hit that line at that place. Why don't you tell us about My Soul to Keep? I will let you talk about it, because that way, if you spill any beans, it's not my problem.
I know.
I didn't do it.
In the ideal universe, people would just wander into bookstores and pick up books and have no idea what they're about and just read them on faith. But that's not the way it works.
Well, it's the way it works once you know an author is a good writer.
Oh, well.
You're like, you just slid into that category.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Now, tell us about this book.
It's a book about immortality. And basically, the synopsis, which I still think gives too much away, but what the heck, you can't get too far away from that, is about a Miami newspaper reporter, a woman who thinks she's married to the perfect husband. He's very doting and affectionate, and he absolutely worships their daughter, and he works at home so she can go outside and work at the newspaper. And he speaks several languages. He's just the perfect husband.
He sends her flowers. He brings her food when she works late.
Absolutely worships the ground she walks on. Like everybody's husbands. And then she, actually, it's not like everybody. I wanted to create the perfect image of a husband for this woman.
Nurturing, supportive.
Right, because then, of course, the fall, the crash is always worse. But
writers are really cruel people.
Yes, they are.
I mean, they spend half a book building somebody up just so that they've got farther to fall.
Isn't that fun?
Basically. Well, what fun is it if you don't do that? But in any case, like most things that are too good to be true, this is too good to be true. And it turns out that the reason he's so learned, multilingual, several other aspects, he's a handyman, he can fix anything, he just, you name it, he can do it, is because he's had 450 years of practice. He's an immortal.
Well, anybody can get good if they do it that long.
Exactly. And basically he's from a colony of Ethiopian scholars, and the conflict of the book is basically it's a book about a dysfunctional marriage, I think. But it's also a book about choices that are good and bad, and how those choices impact on us, and what happens when the other immortals decide that it's time for this character to go home.
And at other levels, I think it's about how your actions have repercussions, sometimes years later.
That what I like about the prologue, and I'm not even going to discuss.
Yeah, and notice how we're dancing around this.
What I like about the prologue is that it has consequences
that
wind throughout the book. I think without...
Pull the prologue and the book falls apart.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of
at least a big chunk of it falls apart.
Yeah, it's a sort of chain of events that could have been avoided, at least for a time. And really, the book is a great deal about choices and the consequences of those choices.
Yeah. It was interesting when you when going through this book. I mean, at some level, you could almost view this as a new slant on the vampire story.
Mm-hmm. He could be a vampire, except for the lack of the blood-sucking thing.
Yeah, but except that he's immortal because he took someone else's blood.
Well, that's true. The blood is the key
So
to the
there's-
immortality. There is a blood connection.
There is a blood connection.
Definitely.
He's immortal like a vampire.
Yes.
In fact, what I really liked about this was that immortality has cost. It has a cost on your spirit.
That's what I think. Doggone it. I actually wrote this to deal with my own morbid fears of death, which is why I write just about everything. And this was sort of a twist on the idea of what if we could live forever? What would it really be like?
It would be incredibly sad eventually.
That's what I kind of figured. Is as much as I'd like to live forever, I think, or at least that's what I thought when I started writing the book, the more I created this character and set up a series of losses and the price to his humanity, the price to his psyche, I guess I realized, I don't think that would be so great.
If you think about it, I mean, as you grow older, one of the aspects of growing older is that there are more and more things you've lost.
Right. And the world around you grows more and more unfamiliar every day.
Yeah, or things that you loved.
Right.
People, places, you name it, go away.
Exactly.
And if you were 450 years old, that's 450 years of loss that has been building up in your heart.
That's true.
That's got to hurt.
And that's why in this colony of immortals, they have pretty strict guidelines in human relations. They have it set up so that you avoid loss. You avoid that consequence on the psyche. It's more concentration on meditation and the metaphysical and less on emotions and, of course, family building. What are they going to do with that? It's a colony of men. There are no women. There are no children. So it's not about families. It's not about, reproduction. So they have different priorities, except this particular immortal just is sort of a fish out of water. He doesn't want to quite let go of those aspects of humanity just yet. He'd like to play with his emotions, and well,
it's interesting because there is, at least in most human experience, something kind of analogous to what the immortals go through. Pets. I mean, everyone who's had a dog or a cat or a goldfish or you name it.
That's true. It's a succession
goes through the experience of loving a pet and then having it die.
That's true.
And then you get a new one and you love it.
in the book, as a matter of fact.
Well, I wanted to know if you did that, because you did that right at the beginning of the story, just right after the prologue, you go right into that. Was that to set up for people this analogy between people and their pets and the immortals and humans? That an immortal could view humans as pets because the immortal goes on and has this series of humans.
That's interesting. Boy, I hadn't thought of it that way. Honestly, the death of the dog was, first of all, based on a real-life experience in my family that was emotionally traumatic. But it was also to make the character instantly sympathetic. Because of his, because this is a guy it's not easy to like. So really, it's not as deep as all that, at least on a conscious level. But as a matter of fact, one of the other immortals who comes to fetch David does refer to his wife as his pet, and that is actually their attitude toward mortals. That they are an inferior. Basically, they're inferior, and why would you even trifle with one? And it's like living with primates to even try to build a home with one. So maybe there is something to that. I hadn't thought of it, though.
Yeah. Subconscious works funny, doesn't it?
It does. How about that?
Amazing. But I mean, as you go through this story, you were mining everyday experience for horror every time you got the chance, weren't you? I mean, you start off with the death. You start off with the prologue, which has something unmentioned, which we will not mention in it.
The secret prologue.
The secret prologue. Tomorrow, people are going to be in the bookstores. I want. There are going to be a bunch of people reading the prologue. But you've got the secret prologue. You've got the dog. Later, you have a story about the woman's problem during her pregnancy, turning her pregnancy into a.
Well,
I mean, you were like mining human experience.
I feel like I've had a very sheltered life, and except for the death of the dog, I haven't had any experiences remotely like any of the experiences in this book. So I guess I kind of put my characters through my worst nightmares to see how they deal with it, because it's sort of it's like, okay, well, if she can come through the other side, maybe it wouldn't be so bad for me.
It's scary to think how good she's going to be when she's had more experience.
I know.
Jesus.
Yeah, you are phenomenally good. It took.
Guys, come on.
It took a few pages, and I'm sitting there reading it, just going, "Damn, she's good." You know, it's, I mean, it's the whole thing. It's the play of the language, it's the plotting, it's the imagination behind the story.
Oh, well.
Whoa.
Thank you.
Immortals have been used in science fiction and fantasy and horror, all different genres. Would you say that My Soul to Keep is biased towards the horror side of the genre, or what? How do you view it?
Probably because I tried to incorporate a suspense element, I would say yes. Although, is that to say that there isn't a suspense element in fantasy?
Yeah. And I guess what that brings up is, how do we when we have stories, how do we decide what genre, you know, if you want to say it fits in a genre, what makes it horror versus science fiction?
Why do you want to decide if you don't own a bookstore and are trying to figure out what shelf you put it on? What difference does it make?
Curiosity.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we human beings categorize.
Okay. I mean,
and so
I look
at some level, it's why do we categorize this as that?
I look at science fiction and horror as both being subsets of fantasy. And horror is whatever's going on, you don't understand what it is. It's like the lights are out and something's killing you. When you turn the lights on and you see that it's a tiger, it's not horror anymore. It's adventure. You're just as dead, but horror is the unknown, and it's the fear of unclean death, and it's that sort of thing. But both science fiction and horror, like I said, are subsets of that world called fantasy.
Or the fantastique.
Yes.
I mean, I am a member of the Horror Writers Association.
Yeah, well, you were nominated for your first novel.
Yeah, for a Bram Stoker Award. Yeah, that was very exciting. But actually, what's funny, I mean, the funny part of this conversation is that I discovered the horror community somewhat accidentally, because though I thought my first novel was a horror novel, that was what I'd set out to write, because the characters are African American and because of the boom in black commercial fiction, I was published as a mainstream African American author. And there was very little attention given to trying to market it as a horror novel. So when I was nominated for the Bram Stoker Award and went to this convention, this meeting for the first time, I described it as going to a family reunion for a bunch of relatives I didn't even know I had. It was nice.
And they wanted to give you a prize.
Yeah, it was nice. It was like, wow, because 90% of my bookstore appearances has been at black bookstores, black readers. So this is obviously, HWA is probably 90% white.
90% white.
Yeah, it was. I mean, actually, that's probably
More than 90, I'm sure.
That's probably generous. So
put them out in the sun longer. They're not dark enough yet.
Yeah, but it's nice. I went this year too, or last year rather, in '97, and I saw a couple more blacks here this year. So, like Steve said, the numbers do seem to be growing.
Do you find that you are a role model and inspiration for other African American writers?
Well, I can only hope so. I really, because I often say that I wish I had discovered Octavia Butler, for example, when I was much younger.
Yeah.
Because I think the reason it took me so long to write a novel within the genre, because a lot of my fiction before I started writing novels, my short fiction was all mainstream. It, didn't have a fantastic element, a speculative element for the most part, and that was because I didn't have any role models. I didn't know of anybody of color who was doing that. Couldn't think of where I would, it just never occurred to me, never even crossed my mind until I happened to be interviewing Anne Rice for the Miami Herald on the telephone. And she didn't say, she wasn't trying to give me advice, but when you're interviewing authors, it's great to try to grab some advice, but you can. And she just said something that lifted a barrier in my mind. It just suddenly dawned on me that I'd always loved it.
What?
So why shouldn't I be writing it?
Yeah.
But up until that moment, it just had never crossed my mind.
I'm glad you did.
Oh, thank you.
It's just like, it's like this book is so good.
Oh.
While you're in town, are you doing any signings? Got any signings or bookstore appearances or anything?
I'm going to plan to be back in March when the Star Trek novel comes out. And I think I'm going to try to set something up with DV and to kind of see if we can talk Tananarive into coming down too, so we can do sort of like a signing together.
Okay.
There, because she'll have 2 books out. Basically 2 books in paperback fairly recently.
Yeah,
and I'll have Iron Shadows and Far Beyond the Stars and a reprint of the Kundalini Equation, which is my favorite of my older novels. It's been out of print for over 10 years. And so that would be a
reappears.
good. That's right. That would be a good party.
Good party. You're listening to Mike Odell's Hour 25 on KPFK Los Angeles. Our guest tonight is Stephen Barnes and Tananarive Due. We're talking with them about writing, horror, you name it, we're talking about it. And I'm Warren James, your host.